She is not merely a name, not merely a figure on a glowing screen. Oprah Winfrey is a force of nature, a towering monument carved from pain, poverty, and fire. She is the immortal queen of American television, the woman who did not just create the most powerful daytime show in history, she reshaped the very heartbeat of culture itself. From the shadows of hunger and abandonment, from childhood days where potato sacks became her dresses, she rose as a living embodiment of resilience. She did not inherit a throne, she built one with her bare hands, brick by brick, soul by soul. Her voice became more than sound, it became a lifeline. With empathy sharper than any weapon, with presence that could silence rooms and mend hearts, Oprah transformed storytelling into salvation. She carried generations through their darkest nights, giving millions the courage to keep breathing. Yet, behind that radiant crown lies the battlefield few dare to face. For decades, the world saw her as unshakable, a billionaire, a global icon, a healer. But beneath the applause were scars that no amount of wealth could erase. Loneliness. Betrayal. The burden of carrying not just her own wounds, but the pain of millions who looked to her for light. The world celebrated the empire. But in the shadows, Oprah bore storms so merciless they could have destroyed anyone else. What she achieved was not a miracle, it was a war. And she fought it not with armies or fortune, but with the sheer audacity of refusing to fall. Before we enter her story, pause. If Oprah ever made you laugh, cry, or believe again, honor her with a like. Because what you are about to witness is not just a biography. It is proof that from the deepest wounds, the fiercest greatness can rise. Behind the radiant crown of fame, the truth begins in shadows darker than most can imagine. Oprah Gail Winfrey was not born into comfort, but into a battlefield where survival itself was the only victory. January 29, 1954. A small town in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. The child of a teenage maid, Vernita Lee, and a barber and coal miner, Vernon Winfrey. Parents who never married, a bond fractured before it began. From her very first breath, Oprah's life was marked not by stability, but by separation, uncertainty, and the cold absence of belonging. As an infant, she was sent to live with her grandmother, Hattie Mae Lee, on a remote farm. There, poverty was relentless, stripping away the joy of childhood and replacing it with endless chores and gnawing hunger. Yet, in that barren soil, a miracle sprouted. Hattie Mae taught her to read. By 3, Oprah was reciting scripture before congregations, her small voice already trembling with the conviction of someone who had seen too much. Words became her weapon, her refuge, her fragile sanctuary in a world that offered her nothing else. But hunger still pressed down like chains. She wore potato sacks as dresses, shamed by a world that never saw her dignity. And yet, inside, she learned the first law of survival: when the world strips you of everything, you must carry dignity within your soul. At 6 years old, she was uprooted again, sent north to Milwaukee to live with her mother. What awaited her was not safety, but neglect. Vernita worked endless hours, leaving Oprah in the hands of strangers, in unstable homes where love was absent. Years later, Oprah confessed the deepest wound: I grew up never feeling wanted, never feeling safe. This was not childhood. This was survival training for a queen not yet crowned. By her early teens, life's brutality sharpened its claws. What should have been years of innocence became a nightmare of betrayal. In homes that should have sheltered her, Oprah endured the unthinkable, violations of trust by men who preyed on her vulnerability. Each act tore away fragments of safety, stripping her of childhood and leaving scars no one could see, but that would haunt her for a lifetime. These were not wounds that faded. They were shadows that followed her into every silence, every night. Then, at just 14 years old, fate struck with devastating cruelty. Oprah gave birth to a baby boy who survived only a short time. A child lost before he could even breathe fully into life. That loss was not only tragedy, it was a wound etched so deeply that no triumph, no empire, no fortune would ever silence it. The grief of motherhood denied, of possibility stolen, became a storm that would live inside her forever. Unable to control her any longer, her mother made a decision that changed everything. Oprah was sent to Nashville to live with her father, Vernon Winfrey. It was both punishment and salvation. Vernon was strict, unyielding, a man who valued discipline and education above all else. He imposed curfews, demanded study, and forced her to reach higher. His love was stern, sometimes cold, but it became the anchor she had been denied all her life. Under his roof, Oprah was no longer a child drifting between broken households. For the first time, she began to rebuild, to see a path beyond mere survival. Years later, she would look back at those wounds with both sorrow and gratitude, admitting they never faded, yet they became the fire that forged her will. "Turn your wounds into wisdom," she declared. And that is exactly what she did. From the ashes of her shattered childhood, Oprah carried into her youth not defeat, but a hunger so fierce it could not be silenced. While other teenagers dreamed of dances and carefree nights, she was clawing her way toward survival, her scars burning like fire beneath her skin. At just 17 years old in 1971, she entered the Miss Black Tennessee beauty pageant. It wasn't glamour she sought, it was opportunity, a door to something greater. Against all odds, she won. That crown was not just a prize, it was proof. Proof that the world might one day see her, hear her, believe in her voice. That victory opened the door to radio. She began working part-time at WVOL in Nashville while still in high school. Behind the glow of studio lights, reality was merciless. She often arrived hungry, her purse nearly empty, her dresses borrowed, her shoes worn thin. Yet the first time she sat behind a microphone, she felt destiny ignite within her. "I knew I was meant to do this," she later recalled, even if no one else believed it. Night after night, her trembling voice grew into a force. While the world saw a young woman on the rise, it did not see the exhaustion carved into her face, the rain-soaked walks home when she couldn't afford the bus, or the silent nights when fear whispered that poverty might still devour her before her dream could take root. By 19, she had already made history, the youngest, and the first black female anchor at WTVF-TV in Nashville. A girl once mocked for wearing potato sacks now stood before cameras that had never been designed for someone like her. The climb was merciless. But with every broadcast, she transformed wounds into strength, tears into power, survival into destiny. Each step forward was a battle. Success did not come wrapped in applause, it came wrapped in doubt, rejection, and sacrifice. Executives told her she was too raw, too emotional, too unpolished for television. They wanted polish. She gave them the truth. And though it nearly cost her, that very rawness, the laughter that rang like church bells, the tears that fell without apology, became her gift. In 1978, she co-hosted People Are Talking, a modest local talk show in Baltimore. From the very first episode, it was undeniable, Oprah was different. She didn't just ask questions, she entered them. She didn't interview guests, she lived inside their stories. When they cried, she cried. When they laughed, she laughed. It wasn't performance, it was communion. And in that radical empathy, America glimpsed the future of television. But behind the scenes, the grind was merciless. 8 long years she toiled, often doubting herself in the quiet hours, whispering, "Maybe this is all I can do. Maybe the world isn't ready for me." Yet those years forged something more powerful than confidence, they forged connection. Viewers who felt invisible saw themselves in her, not polished, not perfect, but real. Then came the call that would change everything. In 1984, Chicago offered her a dying morning show, AM Chicago. Last in ratings. Written off for dead. And many doubted that a young black woman with a southern cadence still in her voice could revive it. But they underestimated the storm inside her. Born of hunger. Forged by betrayal. Strengthened by loss. Within months, she didn't just lift the show, she dominated. AM Chicago rocketed from last place to first, dethroning Phil Donahue, the reigning king of daytime television. The world had just witnessed the rise of a queen. By 1986, the miracle was undeniable. AM Chicago had become the Oprah Winfrey Show, a rebirth that did more than dominate television, it detonated a cultural revolution. What began as a desperate experiment in local broadcasting erupted into a phenomenon that would define generations. When the show went national that year, America didn't just tune in. It gathered. Day after day, millions entered a cathedral of truth, a sanctuary where wounds could be spoken aloud and healing could begin. This was not entertainment. This was a ritual. This was a refuge. And at its center stood Oprah, not just as host, but as mirror, as healer, as the voice of the voiceless. For 25 years, she carried that mantle. Every episode was not simply an interview, but a covenant. People want to be validated. Everyone wants to be seen and heard, she said. And she gave it to them every single day. The result? Not just ratings. Not just fame. But trust, the rarest currency in a world of flashing lights. Yet, glory is never without weight. To dominate ratings for a quarter century meant living under a spotlight that burned without mercy. Every word was scrutinized. Every silence dissected. Critics circled, calling her manipulative, exploitative, too raw, too emotional, too much. The very humanity that made her unforgettable was weaponized against her. And if her soul wasn't enough to dissect, her body was dragged into battle. Tabloids plastered her across covers, mocking her struggles with weight, reducing her existence to headlines. Imagine, a woman who gave an entire nation a voice, having her body turned into public spectacle. Still, she stood. Where others might have broken, Oprah built. She seized ownership of her destiny, transforming herself from an employee into an empire builder. Harpo Productions was born, and the queen no longer just reigned. She ruled. Her empire blazed higher, but even empires stumble. In 2011, after 25 legendary seasons, Oprah closed the Oprah Winfrey Show and unveiled her greatest gamble, OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of her reign, a beacon that carried her vision into eternity. Instead, it nearly broke her. Ratings collapsed. Critics mocked her openly. Headlines declared her finished. And for the first time since her meteoric rise, Oprah stood on the edge of collapse. Later, she confessed with brutal honesty, "The first year of OWN was the hardest time of my life. I thought I had made the biggest mistake." The woman who had built her legend on resilience was staring into the abyss of failure. But what her childhood had taught her was clear: survival is born in fire. And once again, she refused to surrender. Slowly, brick by brick, she rebuilt. OWN found its footing, then flourished. Her empire steadied, her voice thundered again. By 2018, she expanded her reach into the streaming age, forging a partnership with Apple TV+. And in 2021, she shook the world with the interview that echoed across continents, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, watched by nearly 50 million people. It was more than a conversation, it was cultural detonation. Proof that decades later, her voice could still ignite debate, shift history, and move nations. Her empire was no longer measured in television ratings alone, nor in billions of dollars. It was measured in cultural gravity. From Harpo Productions to OWN, from Hollywood to streaming, Oprah had done the unthinkable. She turned every failure into firewood, fueling a legacy that could not be extinguished. She was not just surviving anymore. She was immortal. But glory is never without cracks, and even crowns forged in fire can fracture under the weight of dreams. In 1998, at the very height of her reign, Oprah gambled everything on one vision, a film that carried her soul. Beloved, the Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece by Toni Morrison, brought to life with Oprah herself at its center. This was not just a project. It was a calling. She poured years of her life into it, more than $80 million of her fortune, saturating every platform she owned to promote it. Beloved was not about profit. It was about truth, about honoring the unspeakable pain of Black history, about creating a legacy carved deeper than any talk show could reach. Oprah called it the project she was born to do, and then the dream shattered. When the film opened, theaters sat half empty. Audiences rushed instead to a horror sequel, Bride of Chucky. The box office collapsed, returning only a fraction of her investment. Estimates said she lost $65 million. Critics dismissed it with cold cruelty. Her cinematic triumph had crumbled into one of the most public humiliations of her career. The woman who commanded millions on television now faced rows of vacant seats. The queen of empathy suddenly stood in silence, unheard. She later admitted she sank into depression, disoriented, as if she had lost her way. But here lies the truth: Oprah's stumble was not a weakness. It was daring. She dared to dream too fiercely, to carry too much, to reach for something greater than applause. The failure of Beloved was not proof of defeat. It was proof of audacity, the courage to risk everything for a story that mattered. Queens do not fall. They rise, even from ruins. But not all wars are fought on stages or screens. Some wars live in the body, waged in silence, decade after decade. For Oprah, that war was against herself, her weight, her flesh, her very reflection. The tabloids turned her body into a battleground. Magazine covers circled her figure in red ink, mocking every fluctuation. Every pound gained was a headline. Every pound lost, a spectacle. Even her triumphs were twisted into traps. Who could forget the image of Oprah dragging a red wagon filled with fat onto her own stage, meant to symbolize victory, yet weaponized as vulnerability? The world never let her escape it. Again and again, she tried. Again and again, she was judged. Until her own body felt like a prison she could not step out of. For 25 years, my weight was the biggest, most public demon I had to fight, she admitted. It was never just about food. It was about society, a world that refused to see beyond her size, reducing a titan of culture to numbers on a scale. And then came the toll of decades. Her knees, worn down from carrying both her body and the weight of the world's judgment, finally gave out. By 2021, the pain was unbearable. Every step felt like defeat. For many, double knee surgery would have meant the end. For Oprah, it was a rebirth. She rebuilt herself one stride at a time, walking miles daily, climbing 10-mile trails on weekends, reclaiming inch by inch the body that had betrayed her. Then, in 2023, she spoke with radical honesty. She had turned to weight loss medication. Not a miracle, not vanity, survival. It sparked debate, but her confession was raw, human, unmasked. Even queens bleed. Even icons need help. And still, she walked on. But even as she battled her own body, fate struck where no medicine, no wealth, no discipline could shield her, in the loss of those she loved most. In 1989, tragedy came for the first time with merciless hands. Oprah's younger brother, Jeffrey, died of AIDS at just 30 years old. It was an era when the disease was cloaked in shame, when society turned its eyes away in judgment instead of compassion. Oprah mourned not only her brother, but the injustice of a world that treated his life as less. Fame and fortune could not save him. And in that helplessness, Oprah learned the cruelest truth: there are battles even love cannot win. In 2003, another blow fell. Her half-sister Pat, consumed for years by addiction, died suddenly. Yet, the real loss had come long before, piece by piece, as the disease stole her voice, her laughter, her potential. By the time death claimed her, it felt inevitable, but no less unbearable. Addiction does not only destroy the one it consumes. It destroys everyone who loves them. And Oprah carried that grief like a scar carved into her very soul. Then, in 2010, came revelation tangled with sorrow. Oprah discovered another half-sister, Patricia Lofton, given away for adoption decades earlier without her knowledge. Meeting her was both a miracle and a heartbreak, a missing piece of family finally found, but too late to recover the years already stolen. The weight grew heavier still. In 2018, her mother, Vernita Lee, passed away. And that, more than the billions, more than the fame, is her truest legacy. Not the empires she built. Not the cameras she conquered. But the staggering fact that again and again, she was broken, and again, she chose to rise. Oprah Winfrey's life is not simply a story of success. It is a story of survival against the most merciless storms, of love and loss interwoven, of resilience that refused to die. But amid fleeting romances and heartbreaks, one love became her anchor, steady, unshaken, enduring nearly 4 decades of storms. In 1986, Oprah met Stedman Graham. Unlike others, he did not try to outshine her, nor live in her shadow. He chose the rarest path, to stand quietly beside her. In a world where celebrity relationships flickered like candles in the wind, theirs endured. Through the glare of fame, the whispers of scandal, and the constant scrutiny of doubters, their bond held firm. In 1992, when they announced their engagement, the world expected a royal wedding befitting the Queen of Television. But Oprah stunned everyone. She refused to marry. She confessed that the structure of marriage, with its rigid expectations, could suffocate what they had built. Instead, they chose something radical, a partnership not defined by contracts, but by trust. Not by vows, but by freedom. In Stedman, Oprah found not a rescuer, but a sanctuary. A man who allowed her to soar without clipping her wings, who supported her empire without ever demanding that she shrink to fit a smaller role. And in return, she gave him what the world rarely saw from her: constancy, intimacy, and the quiet devotion of a woman who had given herself to millions, yet reserved her truest self for one. Their love was never paraded on red carpets or splashed across headlines. It lived in the stillness of mornings, in the unseen rituals of daily life, in the simple fact that after nearly 40 years, they are still side by side.